I went to work. I said goodbye to my wife, just like I would any other day. I just didn't expect to not come home for 6 months. I was clear up on top of the crane, which is roughly 70 feet.
There is a picture of the crane similar to what my husband fell from. When they told me that he had fallen from that, my first reaction was, oh God, is he going to die?
When the first responders got to me, I knew I was in trouble because the pain was very intense. It was hard to breathe.
I pulled into the emergency room lot and I parked. The doctor said, ma'am, are you a religious woman? And I said, yes, I am indeed. He said, your husband is in a critical condition. I think the only thing you can do at this moment is pray. The physicians did not want me to tell Brian the extent of his injuries. I saw the amount of blood on the floors. It was something out of a horror show. Things began to deteriorate. They were losing him. He was flatlining.
I thought I was gonna die.
The physicians came out and they said, we don't even think he will make it through the night. Brian had 52 broken bones. His pelvis was completely shattered. It looks as if it's a jumbled up puzzle.
They put me in a medically induced coma for 47 days. They had repaired over 50 broken bones. There's 2 rods in my left leg, 4 plates and 6 rods in my pelvis.
The next few months were anything but easy.
Can you blink your eyes for me? Oh, thank you so much.
Multiple surgeries, pneumonia, blood clots, kidney failure.
Can you give me a little smile?
I was transferred to a rehabilitation center. It was probably a little early when I left, but I couldn't stay anymore.
I never dreamed 5 years later, after all of the recovery, therapy, trials, tribulations, that I would be on the Dr. Phil show for marital help because of what this accident has done to us.
Well, Natalie says she's done everything to take care of Brian. She cooks, cleans, walks the dog, raises their 13-year-old son, and makes sure Brian has whatever he needs. But instead of being grateful, Natalie says he is bitter and demanding, and she feels more like her husband's slave than his wife. She says it's taking a serious toll on their marriage, but Brian says no one really understands what he's going through.
Ever since the accident, Brian and I have lost that husband and wife focus.
Brian, I never said that you were wrong.
The husband that I had before is gone.
There's been a strain in the marriage since the accident because Natalie's had to pick up the slack. I feel like a burden. I can't do the things that I used to do. Not being able to provide for my family definitely makes you feel like a lesser man.
I am his verbal punching bag. Brian is so angry about being in the wheelchair. He starts yelling or cussing.
Trying to communicate usually turns into a screaming match.
I have asked Brian, do you want a divorce? Do you want me to just leave?
I know I have my flaws. You're the first one to say something when he's huffing and puffing. I have tried to communicate with Nat about these things.
Brian relies on me for everything. When he gets a shower, I have to lay his clothes out. I have to get the towel. He cannot make his bed. I have to do that. I went from a wife to a caregiver, nurse, all of the above. My son and I have had the raw end of the deal.
I asked you to come out and watch me.
He just sits there.
Natalie complains that I sit in my chair for the most part. If she were in my shoes, she would sit wherever she's the most comfortable too.
I wrote to Dr. Phil because he has the knowledge to make sure that this family remains a family. I don't want my son to suffer, and I don't want our marriage to suffer. I want to feel like a wife again.
Well, joining me virtually are Natalie and Brian. So Natalie, Brian, it's good to meet both of you.
Thank you. Same to you, Dr. Phil.
It is, to me, an absolute miracle that I'm talking to you today. It's a miracle that you're alive.
I agree with you.
and all the procedures that you've gone through. And I know the toll that it took on you, the suffering, had to be immeasurable. One thing you won't hear me say is, I know how you feel. And Natalie, you say that Brian has been depressed and has actually withdrawn from the world in general, as well as you guys, and is pretty stubborn and bullheaded about some of the things that he needs to do to maximize who he is now.
Absolutely. There was a long time that Brian had such drive to get better, to keep going. And I think when he realized that all of the work going in was not paying off like he thought, he basically just gave up.
Brian, has this broken your spirit? Have you lost hope when you found out that you weren't going to be able to walk again?
It didn't help it none, but I don't think it's broke me.
Do you think this is wearing on your relationship with Natalie? Do you think it's hurting the marriage?
I do believe so, but I think there are other things that go right along with it.
Since the accident, Brian is not able to be intimate, and we have been to doctors, and there are things that can be done. And Brian's response is, if it's not on my own, I don't want any part of it. And that's okay. The last time that I can remember Brian and I being on a date was July the 6th, 2015, our anniversary. And we went to a local vineyard and we had dinner and we sat and talked. I remember so vividly walking in there holding hands. And that is the thing I miss the most.
Well, Natalie says her husband Brian gave up on himself after a debilitating accident and has lost his motivation to live his life. Natalie says now he just lays in his chair and plays with his phone. And she says Brian has gained over 100 pounds since his injury, and she wants him to be active so he can be there for his family. Brian, you lost your dad prematurely due to, at least secondary to, obesity, correct?
Yes.
Are you concerned at all about that?
I think it, to some degree, yes. I don't think it's going to be to the extent my dad was.
Well, Natalie, how do you feel about the way you're being treated? Let's just put this on the table and get this out there.
I'm just frustrated. I mean, Brian will say that I'm not there or I'm not here, but if I am physically not sitting beside of Brian, then in his eyes, I'm technically considered not here. And if I'm outside mowing the lawn, then I'm not here. It's frustrating. It takes a lot to run a house. I maintain my job. We have a child. I have aging parents that have had some major surgeries. I stay active in my church. I stay active with my son's school. Yes, I do take a lot on, and I've always done that. That's nothing new to the person that I am. And I see Brian in this chair, and I feel like he's wasting away. There's a multitude of things he could do.
I put together, from what you said and from what Brian said, a list of what I call self-defeating behaviors. According to you, you say he has a why bother attitude, that he's tired of being kicked down, that he won't go to support groups. He says that's just not for him, and that he won't watch his son ride his bike or play sports, and he criticizes you for not being with him, won't go on dates with you, doesn't sleep in the same bed. And according to Brian, he says, look, nobody understands. They haven't been through what I've been through. Nobody understands. And his first thought in the morning is, how much am I going to hurt today? And that sports with your son are just too hard and they hurt. Vacations are hard. Therapy's painful. And Natalie being away so much makes you upset. She's at her parents a lot because they're more important than him, is the way you feel. So, when I look at this from a relationship standpoint, it appears to me that there's a lot of distance between the two of you and a lot of resentment between the two of you. And I can tell you that I've been doing this for 45 years, and if you continue on the path you're on, you are at high risk for divorce. And when we come back, we're going to add Brian's in-laws to the conversation. They say Brian needs to be grateful he's alive and stop treating Natalie like a servant. But Brian says, you know what? They need to butt out of this marriage because they're not helping.
When I first met Brian, I wasn't crazy about him because he come off real cocky, smart aleck. I was in total shock when Natalie and Brian ended up together, but Brian kind of grows on you. Before the accident, we were getting along better. But since the accident, everything has changed.
I don't think he's ever accepted the fact that he's never going to walk again.
Brian is bitter because he knows he can't do what other people do. Before the accident, Brian treated Natalie as his queen. Now, Brian treats Natalie as his nurse. Natalie handles everything, doctor's appointments, prescriptions, groceries, do the yard work.
He's a dictator. Jake, get me a pop. Nat, get me my medicine. It's not a pleasant thing for a father to hear that his daughter and his grandson have been pretty much turned into servants.
Brian could be in a lot worse shape than what he is. He's home with his wife, his son. They both try to make everything as easy for Brian as they can.
We all have things in our life that we have to deal with. Sometimes they're worse than others, but you have to move on and find some kind of purpose in your life.
Brian, wake up and look around and see what you've got and be so thankful that God spared your life, and tell Natalie and Jacob how much you love them.
Whenever you think life has given you the biggest kick in the teeth, that's when you've got to stand and be strong and show the world what you're made of. And I don't think Brian is capable of that.
Sharyn, Dave, thank you both for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You think that Natalie is being mistreated here, not being appreciated, because Brian is bitter about what has happened to him, correct?
That's exactly what I think. I mean, I understand Brian hurts. Brian's going to hurt the rest of his life. But that doesn't mean everybody else has to be miserable because he hurts.
And Sharyn, you believe that Brian resents your relationship with your daughter, that he sees that as being at his expense, that if she spends time with you, that's taking away from him.
Yes, Dr. Phil, he really does. I know Natalie and I spend a lot of time together. But what Brian doesn't realize, there's a lot of times Natalie walks in my house. I don't say anything. I let her go in the bedroom. I let her cry. I let her get frustrated and cry, Brian. I try to be there. That's all I can do is try to take care of Natalie and Jacob and try to help Brian all I can. And if he resents it, I can't help it. She's going to be my daughter forever.
And you think Brian resents Natalie because she can do things he can't do?
Yes, sir, I do. I see Brian look at her at times and I think, what's going through his head? She gets up and she walks. She out the door, she goes. Brian, she goes to work. You stay home. She drives the car. Brian stays, Yes, I believe Brian resents Natalie a lot.
Brian, how do you feel about what your in-laws are saying?
There's never been any slack where my in-laws are concerned. When I first came around, Sharyn said I was cocky. And the short of it is I didn't bow down and be their perfect idea of what their daughter should have. I'm not submissive to anyone. If you want respect, you have to earn it.
Well, my question is, are you respecting your wife? And are you doing everything you can to be the husband and father that you need to be? And that doesn't have anything to do with standing on your feet. It has to do with you manning up and being everything that you can be, regardless of your physical stature.
Brian has gained over 100 pounds in the 5 years since the accident. His parents are deceased from both being overweight, and I don't want that to happen to Brian.
I think the fast food that Natalie brings home instead of cooking a meal contributes to my weight gain.
When I confront Brian with needing therapy to keep his body moving, it's my fault. I'm expecting too much.
I was in therapy for 3 years. I realized that things were only going to get to a certain point, and then that was as good as it was going to get. the pain was outweighing the progress. So I've pretty much given up therapy in order to be more comfortable.
Natalie says their 13-year-old son, Jacob, does a lot for his dad, Brian. He gets him breakfast, helps him dress, gives him his medication, and the list goes on and on. Natalie says Jacob is focused on taking care of his dad, that he barely really has time to be a teenager. That's why I said this is kind of a forced maturity. Jacob says he just wants to spend quality time with his dad. He wishes that Brian would put his phone down and just pay attention to him, just have a conversation with him, come out and watch him do things he does. He wants to connect with his dad, but he says his dad's just too distracted.
Ever since my dad fell, my mom and dad's relationship hasn't been the greatest. It's been going downhill because they're not very good at communicating with each other. It turns into a massive argument. My mom gets mad at my dad because he usually sits in his chair all the time and he doesn't do much around the house. Before my dad's accident, he could control his temper, but after the accident, it's kind of got worse. He goes off on me.
You're acting like a total butt. That's your first, last, and only warning today.
He does it more to my mom than he does me. My dad has to realize that my mom has way too much on her plate, taking me to school, packing my lunch, looking in after my grandmother, helping everybody at work. It's been a while since I saw them hug or kiss. All my friends, when I go over to their house, their mom and dad always hug each other or kiss each other. And it feels like my mom and dad aren't normal like other mom and dads. I think my dad can be more caring. He could say to my mom that he loves her more and make sure she gets noticed when she comes home from work. I would like him to get back in therapy so he would be a little bit more active with me. But if it puts him through pain just to please me, then it's not worth it.
Well, joining me virtually is Jacob. Jacob, how you doing?
Good, how about you?
Well, I'm all right. I'm really glad to talk to you. What do you like to do most with your dad?
We like to go to the car show.
So your dad's a gearhead, isn't he?
Yes, very
Yeah.
much.
And you too?
Maybe a little more than him at times.
Oh, really? So you would like nothing better than to share more time in that with your dad, like building a hot rod or something like that?
Yes. Maybe we could do more stuff together. Sometimes I ask him to wrestle and I understand it hurts him. But sometimes that's all I want to do, but he can get on the floor and play with our dog Bobby. But it seems that he can't get on the floor and wrestle with me because it makes him hurt.
Brian, what do you think when you hear him saying that he wants to spend more time with you and wants more attention from you?
The attention he wants is to do things that I can't do.
What could you do that you think would make Jacob feel like he was more important to you?
After listening to that, I'm not sure. Because Jake and we go everywhere together. As I've said before, there's not a lot of times that Natalie's around, so it's usually just me and Jake.
Yeah. Well, Natalie says she wants Brian to stop using his injuries as an excuse and start being more involved as a husband and a parent. Now, Natalie says I'm her last hope in resolving her marriage and saving her family, and that is a task that I happily lean into. Now, my next guest, Dave Fabrizio, is one of the most sought-after orthopedic sports manual physical therapists in Los Angeles. His patients range from A-list actors to studio heads to Fortune 500 CEOs and, well, me too. Please welcome Dave Fabrizio.
Thank you, Dr.
So you and I have worked together a lot of years, and I know a lot about your philosophy about physical therapy. And Brian has just quit physical therapy. Now, he's 5 years into this injury. You've studied the case extensively. You can't do that. You can't just stop physical therapy after this kind of horrific injury, can you?
No. Brian, first thing I'd like to say is I'm truly sorry this has happened to you and what you've been through. I think the important thing is that you've got to regain your life here. You've got to regain your functional independence. I watched the videos of you. You're a very high-level functioning para, and there's absolutely no reason that you can't do more. I think the key is I'd like to see the weight loss, improve your efficiency so you're requiring less energy, and I think that might help your pain levels as well.
So, Brian, what do you think about what David is saying about the importance of getting back into physical therapy?
I don't deny it. I mean, I guess the biggest pain issue is my left hip. Whenever I do therapy, the walk-in, the working out, whatever the case may be, when I'm done, it's all I can do to stand on that leg. My hamstrings are extremely weak. My glutes are very weak. I have to have something to lean on because I can't physically hold myself up.
Isn't that exactly why he needs to be in physical therapy?
100%. 100%. The main thing is you have to build your strength. If you don't work on these things, forcing your body to adapt, you're going to decondition and you're going to get weaker and weaker. And then the bone density, if you're not moving around, your bone density is going to decrease and create other issues for you.
Did you ever think you would do in the Paralympics what you've done when you were in physical therapy and working your way back?
Absolutely not. No, that was not in my radar or wildest dreams. I never got off the bike
asking
again.
Where your injury is?
I'm in L1 incomplete. Yeah, so from my point of injury, from the waist down, I only have use of my quads, no glutes, very partial hamstrings, nothing below the knees.
We're just about the same because I have nothing below the knees and all that stuff too.
Jacob just turned 13 and said his one and only birthday wish was to be able to ride bikes with his dad again. And obviously, that's not something his dad says he can do, but I want to make Jacob's wish come true. So Outrider USA is giving Brian a bike worth $15,000, which has the ability to give Brian independently the ability to get outside and have fun with his son again. Now, Outrider USA specializes in building bikes for quadriplegics, paraplegics, stroke victims, and wounded veterans. And Brian, I think this can be an amazing way for you to get out right beside your son, Jake, on the street or off-road or whatever, and get to riding that bike and feeling that wind through your hair right beside your sons. You think that might be fun?
Yes.
Yeah.
Brian, Natalie, you two have had some serious trauma in your life, and you've got a choice. I can't change what has happened, but I can change what does happen. You can hit the reset button and you can decide, you know what? We can either go through this the way we've been doing it, and if that happens, Natalie, you're going to suffer from what's called caretaker burnout. And you will get to the point where you say, I have to save myself to save our son. And then you will say, what kind of person leaves an injured husband? Well, you'll become that kind of person because you'll do it to survive. Or you can both decide we need to manage this better. And it's possible that you can forgive each other and yourselves for what has not happened that should have happened and what should have happened that hasn't happened. I'm going to get you a therapist through our own company, Doctor On Demand, that will help walk you through that. I'll set you up with 10 sessions right away so you can sit side by side in front of a computer and work your way through that. And Brian, you've got to decide, I'm either going to just sit here in this chair and waste away, or I'm going to reach down there and I'm going to find some new energy and I'm going to fight my way back. And I think getting out there with Jake and riding bikes can really get some endorphins flowing and get you guys bonding at a whole different level. And Brian has always loved working on cars, but ever since the accident, he's had a difficult time pursuing his passion. Well, I want to change that too. There are some inventors. One is named Eric Birmingham. The other is Kevin Ferguson. And they have a company called Personal Positioning Technologies. and they have designed something called the human hoist chair that eliminates bending, stooping, and crawling. It adjusts for comfort and rolls up to the kitchen table and fits through a standard door. Now, it's worth $20,000, and they are willing to give this incredible device, Brian, to you as a gift, so you can get in that garage, you can do everything you need to do with your son so you guys can start working on hot rods again. And I'm a big believer in this. I've got a hot rod myself. I got a 57 Chevy that...
It's a beautiful car.
Well, I'm turning about 750 horsepower in it, which right now you really need in LA traffic, because you can get all the way up to 25 miles an hour in LA traffic. But I know how much fun it is to work on these things, and I want you to have that joy back in your life, and you and Jake to share that as well. And Natalie, hopefully that'll give you a break while they're out working on that car. You can go do something to give you a little bit of a break. I really want to put some laughter and joy back in this home. So hopefully this is going to be a changing day in this family's life. Fair enough, guys?
Yes.
More than fair, Dr. Phil.
I appreciate it all.
Thank you so very much.
Now, if you at home want to have your own doctor on demand, go to Google Play Store or the Apple App Store, download
A devastating work accident
Brian had 52 broken bones.
divides a family.
Natalie handles everything.
He's a dictator.
I'm just frustrated.
I feel like I'm being beat up on by everybody.
Next, Dr. Phil. Check your local listings.